the group. And, I think what's really important for me as a keynote is, I really wanted to open up your mind a little bit. I think everyone comes to this conference with their own preconceptions. I do. I have lots of crazy stories in my mind. All of them, I'm sure, are untrue. And so I really think it's important that we kick things off properly. So the first thing I'd like to do is, I would like to encourage everybody to meet somebody new. And, really, when there is time for action, the best time for taking an action is right now. So I think the first thing I'd like everyone to do is first identify someone near you in arm's reach that you don't know. So everyone look around, look near you, near yourself, look for someone who you don't know. All right, now before you do anything, okay, so some people are already meeting this person. But before you meet the person, I want you to make up some story about this person in your mind. Now here's the thing that you notice that everybody makes up stories about other people. And most of them are not true. But go ahead and indulge yourself. Make up some story. Okay, so now that you've done that, what I'd like you to do is introduce yourself to that person, learn and remember their name, and greet them, find out why they are here. And then the next time you see this person, this is your conference buddy. The next time you see this person at this conference, remember their name and greet them like they are your friend. This is important, and the reason why it's important is because we're all here to make the connections and build the social network that will transform this whole mobile ecosystem. Because developers are about the power of transformation. And so I'm very excited about this. So everybody stand up. I'm going to pick someone, and I'm going to meet them. So you do the same. Hello. Hi. My name is Miko.
I'm Surya.
Surya.
Yeah.
Great. Nice to meet you. Why are you here?
To attend this conference.
Yeah. What's your interest?
Interest is Android application development.
Oh, okay. So you guys build apps?
Not yet. Maybe in future.
Okay, great. Surya, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
My name is Miko.
Yeah.
Least one friend. And when you greet this friend, you have to greet them like they're your long-lost relative. And the other thing, too, is introduce them to your other friends. So if you see them on the break, you say, hey, this is my other friend, and you introduce them. Because this is really the social network that's going to make this transformation possible. So I'm very excited about this. So first of all, thank you. Thank each and every person here for coming. Everyone traveled here. It's a great expense and difficulty. And thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me your attention and your non-refundable time. I feel an obligation to serve you. So, I tried my best to make a talk that will reach many people. But I can't guarantee that my talk is going to help you. I want very badly for it to help you, but I don't know everyone in the room. I just have crazy stories about everyone in my head. I think lots of you work for different companies and you're really interested in mobile development. Some of you are getting started. Some of you already have apps. Some are in the App Store and some are not. So I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. But if you want to get a hold of me, you can just email me, miko@key.com, miko@kii.com. And if I didn't give you a good keynote, you can ask for, you can ask me to try to help you in other ways. So I'm here to help. So I really want to help. I have two keynotes. Today, I want to kick off the conference, and I want to share my excitement and enthusiasm about this space. I want to talk about platforms. And I want to tell you what I'm working on, because I'm excited. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I have a keynote called the Neuroscience of Mobile App Development. So I actually have a background in neuroscience, and this is a part of something that is personally very exciting to me. So please check out my keynote tomorrow. So I was very well introduced, so I don't need to go into any details. I just want to say that I feel like I'm a platforms guy. And the way I define a platform is it's basically the invariant substrate atop which you launch your enterprise, right? So what does that mean? Well, so right now, I'm standing on a platform right here, right? This stage, right? And I'm launching my enterprise of this keynote. So therefore this is a platform, right? So for me, I think this is a mindset. So platform is a mindset, and I want to help you think about, like, what is my platform? What are my platforms? Everybody stands on more than one platform. So that's really the way I define this, and that's the question I want you to ask yourself: is what are the platforms that I'm standing on today, and where do I launch my enterprise? So Steve Yogi, a famous Google engineer, he got to be famous by posting a rant about why Google doesn't understand platforms and why Amazon is going to eat their lunch. This was very embarrassing because he didn't realize this rant was going to be published on the internet. But he made a very good point, which is he says that an app with a platform will always replace an app without a platform. So I think that's a very interesting property. So let's try to understand a little bit about what that might mean in the upcoming slides. This is my son. His name is Jackson. He's 7 years old. And I'm such a platform nerd that when my son was born, I turned to my wife and I said, I am now platform. I'm no longer an application. And my wife, who's a school teacher of English, turned to me and she said, you're crazy. But what does it mean? It means that he's really the application. He's the person who's now launching his enterprise. And now I have to supply infrastructure services, right? People really hate infrastructure. Infrastructure, people only complain about infrastructure when it's not working. So it's very sad, but that's part of it. So my friend, I met this guy in the late 1990s in Silicon Valley. His name is Dave McClure, and he's the head of a company called 500 Startups. And he's a pretty famous angel investor. And so he has a definition of platform that looks like this. He says that successful platforms have three things, right? They have features, which is pretty generic, right? But they also have users and they have money. So that's one way of thinking about platform, which is if you're launching an enterprise, you're going to need these three things. So that's an important framing for a platform. And this makes for pretty obvious things, right? Which is that, these are considered the obvious platforms. So the Google, the iOS, the Android. So when you start thinking about mobile platforms, these are obvious. So today, I'm not going to talk about the obvious platforms, right? So if you think, we're going to learn more about Android today, you're going to learn that from other speakers. I'm kind of interested in emergent platforms. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about these platform providers. It's fairly complex, but if you look here, there's this emerging space called back-end as a service. And these companies in here, Parse, Convey, StackMob, my own company, Key, these companies are now kind of emerging as part of this native ecosystem of mobile development. And these are the emergent platforms that I think are of interest. Before I go there, I wanted to talk about another property of platforms. And this is all just concept space. This is all just designed to stimulate your thinking. So what is this image? This image is some very small subset of the Mandelbrot fractal. And for those of you who studied mathematics and fractal geometry, what you know from the Mandelbrot set is that it's really this one shape. And as with many fractals, that shape has an infinite sort of surface area, because you can zoom in on any edge piece and it'll keep getting more and more crinkly. And so if you keep zooming in, if you're going to trace the Mandelbrot set around the outside, it's going to create an infinitely long line. So what we're talking about is a mathematical shape that has an infinite amount of surface area, and yet it contains a finite volume. Right? So what does that mean in terms of platform? So imagine something like the App Store. So look at iTunes, for example, or maybe Google Play. So together they constitute about 1.2 million applications. So what's exciting about these platforms is that if you're into something very strange, right? So if you look on your mobile device, everybody has their own strange applications. So I have applications for getting rid of junk mail. I have applications for looking up restaurants. I have an application that keeps track of my sleep, whether I'm sleeping well or not. I have applications about yoga, about meditation, about Twitter. I have applications about all kinds of things. I have the new Angry Pigs game. So, a lot of things, right? Each one of these applications provides, in my case, the Android ecosystem, with a unique channel to reach a unique, strange human individual. That's me. So the thing that's interesting about this is that the App Store creates just an infinite number of variations, but the central core of the platform does not have an infinite volume, right? Why is that important? Why is it important? It's important because Apple, despite being the most valuable company in the history of the world, doesn't have an infinite number of dollars. So they can't contain an infinite number of servers, even though they would like to. Right? So what's happened is that by cracking this open in a complex and, let's say, chaotic way, it creates surface area. And different organizations and platforms crack open in different ways. So the Apple platform is cracked open at the iOS layer so that developers can build any apps they want as long as they can pass through the Apple approval process, right? Which is kind of bad. But if you look at the Android ecosystem, it's even more cracked open where people can start to kind of build out Android variation, and that variation is very much related to how this platform expresses itself. So the thing that I think to me is exciting is that there's another platform that mirrors this kind of complexity, and that is really the biosphere, right? So the Earth is populated with thousands of different species, right? So if you look at the problem of the Earth and the biosphere, you're talking about near infinite variation, but the underlying energy is the same, which is it's just different ways of expressing solar energy, right? So if you look at evolution, there's highly conserved components or DNA sequences, and then there's almost infinite variation on top. So the infinite variation on top is what is exciting about this new industry, and that's what you all are here to create. So that is why this is fundamentally revolutionary, because each person in this room has the potential to create some unique contribution, some unique channel to some unique group of users. So that, to me, is extremely revolutionary. So, what is powering this explosive growth? So, everybody knows about Moore's Law. This is a staple of keynoters. Everyone's been to a conference and they say, hey, Moore's Law, doubling the number of transistors per die over a given time period, a doubling interval. This is an exponential function, and it's extremely exciting. But I'll tell you, there's more coming. So just to kind of stretch your imagination, this was posted on another friend of mine's web on his Facebook, actually. It's called Rose's Law, and it's basically the doubling interval for quantum computing. So Steve Jurvetson, who's a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, posted this Rose's Law, and there's a really strange dot here. And this dot really, I can't call him on this dot. So he said that at this point in time, the quantum computing becomes faster than the universe. So I had to respond. I was like, Steve, what are you talking about? Like, how can, what does that even mean, right? It's obviously inside the universe. All right, so he basically said, well, if you used every single atom in the universe to create a digital computer, and then you apply that computer to solving problems, it would still be slower than the quantum computer that's created by Rose's Law at this time frame. And if you look at this axis is actually not that far into the future. Somehow the slide has cut off this horizontal axis, but this is all kind of talking about 2020. So the time frames of this kind of doubling interval are very imminent. So we're talking about pretty fast cycles of iteration. So you guys, there's probably plenty of super technical people in the audience that can tell me more about quantum computing than I know or care to know. But, you know, suffice it to say that this surge of power is really driving the technology side of this revolution. And this is really a huge, huge part. And the other piece that I think is super exciting is timing, which is that we've reached a certain point where the timing of all of these convergent forces has come together in a unique configuration. So just to talk a little bit about us, so this is sort of completely unrelated to anything, but I couldn't resist throwing it in, which is when I was at Software AG, I actually had the good fortune to have breakfast with Steve Wozniak, who's the other co-founder of Apple. And just to kind of, this is totally an aside, I apologize. I can't, I put this slide in at like 3:30 in the morning last night. So I was like super tired, and I think I put it in a funny order. But I do want to mention this, which is the thing that he said was most important in his innovation is he was talking about single-player Pong. So if you remember early computer games, there was a game called Pong, which was invented by Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari Corporation. And it was basically two paddles, and then the ball that bounces between the paddles. Holy crap, I'm like super old, aren't I? Everybody's like, okay, don't know about that. So what Wozniak was telling me about was single-player Pong, which was eventually turned into a game called Breakout. So all the people who are super old like me remember this. And he said that the big challenge for him was to make this game with only 44 chips. So the thing that was amazing is during his era, making a game actually meant putting chips onto a circuit board and then wiring them together, right? And he said the fewer chips you could make, the better, right? And so for him, the thing that struck me as amazing is the guy who's responsible for like probably the most influential computer in human history, which is the Apple computer, and then subsequently Apple II. I'm only arguing that it's the most influential. This guy is obsessed with reducing the number of chips, right? So that's a very interesting observation, right? Which is he's not interested in making more chips, more stuff. He's interested in making less. All right, that was a totally gross aside, so I'll flip the page. So coming back to the concept of timing, the thing that's amazing to me, more amazing than Moore's Law, is this kind of technology adoption speed. So if you look at this chart here, this is really, in terms of percentage of U.S. households, this is a U.S.-centric slide. But the same rules apply anywhere, which is that technologies take a long time to get to 100% adoption, right? And some technologies don't quite get to 100% adoption. So if you look at, for example, electricity did pretty well. And by like, mid-1960, electricity was pretty much in 100% of U.S. households. But look, I mean, that whole electricity thing got started pretty early, right? So the beginning of this 1900 period. So, it's the whole electricity thing was a big win. By the way, when asked to study electrical lighting, there was a parliamentary body in England who was studying this, and the conclusion they came to is electrical lighting, this is right around this time, by the way, in the 1900 time frame. Electrical lighting may be good enough for our overseas friends, but boing, sorry, may be good enough for our overseas friends, but it is of no use to practical-minded men, right? So the UK essentially rejected the concept of electrical lighting. Well, needless to say, the naysayers were wrong, right? But the thing I wanted to comment on in terms of this adoption curve is, first of all, most of these curves have the sigmoidal shape, right? It's an S shape. It ramps up, and then it hits an inflection point, and then it starts ramping to flat. Facebook is doing the same thing, with 1 billion users and including their fake users. And these are all these different curves, right? So if you actually look, these curves are getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And if you actually look at this so-called internet curve, right, the adoption of Android is probably about 2x faster than the adoption of the web and about 100x faster than the adoption of the desktop PC. 100x faster. So we're talking about really steep curves of adoption. So the thing that's amazing, what's happening is that these technologies are being introduced so quickly and the shipping cycles are amazing. The industry ships 1.5 billion devices every year onto a planet that only contains like 7 billion humans, right? So it's like 1.5 billion devices, here you go, right? Now, obviously, a lot of these devices are being replaced and churned, but the thing that's amazing about that pace is if you're someone like, well, I don't want to say anything about our platinum sponsor, but if you miss a shipping cycle, you can be subject to being washed out by like some intruder, right? So the thing that's amazing is the pace of innovation is just blistering, and the pace of adoption is equally blistering, which makes now a really exciting time to be in mobile, which is we've achieved a certain moment, an inflection in time where mobile and cloud are colliding in this amazing, phenomenal way, where mobile is about adoption, it's about humans, it's about users, affinity, user acquisition, retention, monetization, and just this kind of engagement of the user. And then that creates an exponential growth, right? Without that user traction, affinity, adoption, excitement, you don't really need anything. You don't need infrastructure. You don't need, because, if users aren't excited, then you're nowhere, right? But if the users are excited, how do you power that, right? And the thing that's exciting to me is that there's an answer, which is the cloud has arrived. And that's a huge power that's available to the developer today in a very compact and easy to use form. So these emergent platforms that I'm going to describe have cloud in almost like a distilled crystalline native format. You can get cloud into your app within 2 to 5 minutes. 2 of the minutes are going to be setting up an account, right? So you just drop an SDK and the cloud appears as a set of objects and you're persisting things, right? And the thing that's really amazing about the cloud that's different from the device is that the cloud remembers everything. The cloud is eternal. The cloud actually connects across accounts. It connects across devices. It connects simultaneously if you have multiple devices. And it provides this kind of seamless experience. I don't want to steal anything from our next keynoter, but on the cab ride over, I was talking to Scott, and he was like, look at what Netflix is doing, right? I mean, you pause it on your phone, and then you look on your TV, and it's picking up where that thing left off, right? It's just this amazing power that's at the mobile developers' fingertips today. And to be honest, cloud, if mobile had taken off like 5 years before, the kind of quality of cloud that you would have to put to power is just not appropriate for what's happening. So I mean, the thing is your growth curve of users goes like this, right? It just goes through the roof. And what's the cloud doing? The cloud is just scaling along with your adoption, just lockstep. It's amazing. So this convergence is a once in a career, once in a lifetime confluence of power. So I'm super excited about what is happening between these two sides. And to me, this is really fundamental in terms of the coevolution of the human and the machine and how the synthesis is starting to converge. So I'm super excited because, developers have never been more empowered. I mean, when I was evangelizing the Java platform, it was a crazy time. We went from 0 to like 5 million developers in some number of years. And, that was super exciting. But when you look at the Java platform, it was still like a bunch of code, and you had to download this huge thing, and you had to like get your, it was a big hassle. Compared to what is available today, it's unbelievable what's available today. So just a brief kind of touch on exponentiality. Now I realize that this may be old hat to a lot of people who study mathematics, but fundamentally, we are not wired to understand exponential growth. We don't have any intuition about how exponential growth works, right? I mean, it appears in nature in the form of bacterial multiplication or population multiplication, but we don't intuit what does that mean? How does that hit, right? And, I cribbed some of this from Dr. Albert Bartlett, who's a professor emeritus in Colorado, but he basically says that the greatest failing of the human species is the inability to understand the exponential function. Now, that seems like a bit of hyperbole to me. Human beings have done a lot of other really crappy things. But, this one's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So everybody has probably seen some version of this in one of their math classes, but indulge me. So there's basically a crazy mathematician who worked for a king. And, basically the mathematician figured out some really awesome math problem for the king, and the king said, I want to give you a reward. I'm going to give you this huge pile of gold. And the mathematician said, no, I don't want any gold. I'll tell you what I do want is I want 1 grain of wheat, and just put it on the first square of the chessboard. And then you want to put 2 grains of wheat on the second square of the chessboard. And then you want to put 4 grains of wheat on the next square of the chessboard. And by the time we've filled the chessboard, then your debt to me, the court mathematician, will be paid. So, the king was obviously like a typical stupid king. So he was like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. What a deal, right? So what happened? Oh, so in total, the king ended up owing 18 quintillion grains of wheat, which, effectively bankrupted the kingdom. But, if we know anything about kings and mathematicians, the mathematician probably ended up beheaded. So, the king wins, right? I mean, you can't really fight these guys this way. So even if you're super smart, you might not be getting the biggest salary. And being super smart is not always the best strategy in your organization. But still, the point I'm trying to make isn't about that. The point I'm trying to make is people are really crappy at understanding how this stuff works. They have no gut feeling about exponentiality. So why is exponentiality so important? It's important because we, as a society, are facing really big problems. Right? We've got big issues, right? And so the question is how do we fix big problems like this? I mean, I don't know who's got the bigger problem, the owner of the house or the owner of the boat. But it's a problem, right? These are big, big problems. And, the thing is I'm not expecting any one of you in this room to solve this problem with the boat. But each of us can contribute to something that has exponential power, and that's where I think the magic happens. So, this is like a problem that the United States has. I mean, it doesn't necessarily affect, this country so much, but, there are these big banks, and they're really messed up. Here's a map of the United States healthcare system. So that's like a big old mess. How does that get fixed? And, here's a map of the stability in Afghanistan. So this was created by some clever consultant, and the consultant was like, oh, so let's figure out what are the forces at work that make Afghanistan stable, and what are the forces that make Afghanistan fall apart, right? And it turns out it's kind of complicated. So the point I'm trying to make here is that exponentiality actually amplifies the power of the individual to a point where they can actually create impact in a pretty large way. So, I mean, I don't want to, get super ambitious. I mean, I think it was, Mother Teresa who said that you can't actually do great things. You can only do small things with great heart. So I don't expect, someone to make a smartphone app that fixes Afghanistan. So, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is that, we can really apply ourselves and go deep and fix something. And here's another great leader, whose birthday was last week. And, this quote is really awesome. He says, I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. That's kind of why I had everybody meet somebody at the beginning of this conference, because, the solution is really in us all, where we all can kind of know each other, meet each other, and help each other. I think that's where some of these bigger problems get fixed. So I don't want to kind of paint with too big of a brush, but I think that's pretty important. And it's not always that easy for technology types. Technology types tend to be very introverted, and the kind of stories that technology types, and I'm only able to say this with any conviction because this is also me, which is that I'm kind of an introverted guy, and people make me nervous, and I make up really wrong stories about people. And so when I meet them, I'm like, what are you going to do? I'm nervous. I don't know what to say, right? So meeting people becomes, I think, the key, ultimately. And then another piece. This is something that's going to hit tomorrow. I'm going to talk more about this tomorrow, which is, this sounds kind of crazy. There's a lot of kind of weird people in San Francisco who talk about transhumanism and all this kind of stuff, and they talk about implanting chips inside of their brains, stuff like that. And that kind of stuff makes me nervous. I don't want to implant stuff in my brain. And here's the basic fundamental reason why is so I ordered a piece of hardware, the HeartMath M-Wave 2. I ordered this little electronic device, and guess what? It had a USB mini, not a micro interface. And the software for this thing came on a CD-ROM. This is just a couple weeks ago, right? And can you imagine implanting stuff like a CD-ROM into your body? It's going to be obsolete the moment it ships, right? So I mean, this kind of thinking is just kind of weird and dangerous and scary and wrong in a lot of ways. But when I talk about human-machine coevolution, I'm talking about 1.5 billion devices that can have a gigahertz plus processor with 4, 8, 16, God knows how many cores in the hands of billions of people on this planet. And these devices really do act as kind of co-processors, right? So for example, I have all these calendar reminders and all these things kind of flowing from my device into my brain because I don't remember things very well. like my brain doesn't hold that many memories. And, when I'm running my day, this thing tells me like what it is that I want to be doing, and it coordinates my day. I remember back in the 90s, I bought the Apple Newton. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but this was like one of the first personal digital assistants. It was like this big old clunky thing, and it tried to recognize your handwriting. It was horrible. But I remember one day I had all my calendar laid out, and I had my little, it was ridiculous. I had maps of where to go, but it wasn't like, it was worse than Apple Maps are today on iOS 6. It was really bad, right? But I remember having this perfect day where I had meetings in Marin and in San Francisco and in the East Bay, and I remember having this perfect day where everything kind of landed perfectly on time, and I was kind of coordinated with my environment. And I remember looking at my Newton and thinking, like, this thing is like becoming a part of me. This is really my brain coprocessor. And today, this thing is connecting with the cloud that can store arbitrarily large amounts of data in time frames that are effectively forever. So, that's an exciting, exciting potential. I'm going to talk more about coevolution tomorrow in my talk about neuroscience. But today, I just wanted to zoom in on this emergent platforms thing. So this slide is a repeat. It's intentionally a repeat. I wanted to revisit this. So I want you guys to watch this space, which is the back-end as a service space. Because what's created in this space is really a new way of developing mobile cloud. So, there's a bunch of players in this space. This is where it kind of segues into stuff I'm working on right now. So I'm working at this company called Key that is about to launch a product into this space. I'll talk a little bit about the launch tomorrow because that's when the launch is. But this is kind of interesting, which is, I think the cloud power that's available in this previous generation are like the Herokus and the Amazons, which, by the way, are miraculous, incredible superpowers of cloud. But what's kind of emerged, and there's additional platform players kind of in the gaming space. There's platform players in the cross-platform space. But the group I want to concentrate on are these guys in the bottom here, which are basically what they've done. The work that they've done is they've taken the entire abstraction of the cloud, and they've essentially put it into SDKs. So the basic ticket to enter the space is you have an SDK for iOS, you have one for Android, you have one for JavaScript, and then you have a REST API. And the way you talk to the cloud is the same way you talk to any other on-device object. So if you're in Objective-C, you just throw an Objective-C, you say, hey, here's a JSON object, boom, there you go. NS Dictionary, you're throwing these objects, and boom, they go into the cloud, right? So the cloud just shows up as an object on device. It's a client object. That's what the SDK does. Same thing for Android, right? And so what it means is you drop the SDK in, and you don't have to learn cloud programming languages. Now, there's a lot of awesome languages out there. Ruby's amazingly cool. People are doing awesome things with crazy languages, Python, PHP, whatevers. But at the end of the day, mobile developers don't have to learn those things. They can just plug in these SDKs. So, the way to kind of look at this is, the apps kind of are up here, and they're kind of growing, and they're doing their thing, right? But if you look below, what separates the platform from the applications, another way of defining platform is it's a set of reusable contracts, right? So a platform is really just an agreement. It's basically an agreement. It's a commitment from one party to another. Because if you look at it from a business perspective or a technical perspective, SDK or API contracts, those are all contracts. So if you look at the contracts, they're really just promises to deliver. And those promises really form the basis of another definition of platform, which is that invariant substrate that you launch your enterprise on, right? So if you look at that definition, it's like, what am I launching my platform on? I'm launching it on the promises that are made, whether they're business contracts or whether they're contracts that are API contracts. And we can assume that they're invariant because the person on the other end of that contract promised that they would deliver. And that's what makes a contract into a platform. So just wanted to quickly zip through the whole Key thing, which is, Key is a company I'm working with now. And basically what we look for is we look for people with great ideas, with lots of users, user traction, and this kind of excitement. And what we provide is we provide investment, we provide these distribution deals, and we provide this cloud technology. So, I just want to kind of cast the net out here. Anybody who's interested in this stuff, if you're building an app that you think could be the next big thing, send me an email, miko@kii.com, and we'll chat. We'll be in touch because, we want to help. This is our business to help. And, this is the cloud technology that we talk about, which is basically you throw an SDK in, bang, iOS, Android, JavaScript, and you can have this entire instant backend without writing a single line of server code. The reason why this is so critical is effectively that today, I'm going to skip that slide for time, is the key determinant of success is actually out in terms of people. So if you remember the Gandhi quote, it's not about muscle. It's not about big iron. It's not about who's the best server programmer. It's about the people. It's about connecting with users, collecting users, getting the users excited, human beings, right? That's why the design of applications is so critical, because that's the part, that's the art. That's the exciting part. And so our proposition with this Key Cloud is most mobile application developers don't have like 60 server engineers at their disposal. So why don't we build this back-end stuff and you concentrate on keeping your users happy? Because happy users is the key differentiation between success and non-success in the app universe. So, instead of like really getting too granular with these components, I thought the best thing I could do is just kind of like do one of these kind of funny live demo things. This is always a bit touch and go to try to do this in front of a live audience. This is sort of a haven't done this before type of a thing. I've done 1 billion failed demos. I just haven't done it in front of you guys with this technology. But this is basically, as you can see, our developer portal is the portal itself is a Heroku app. And if you go to Key Cloud, which is soon to be at developer.key.com, you can just kind of log in here. And basically what you get is you get this dashboard. So I created this app called My Awesome App. You can create an app really easily just by like clicking Create an App. So I'm creating an app right now. I can kind of like figure out which platforms it is. So it's like an Android app. It's an iOS app. Okay, in deference to Scott, I'll make an HTML5 app too. And it's really pretty simple, right? So, this is the kind of power that people are given with this kind of new class of clouds, right? So as you can see, I could generate a shell app for Android. So I can just click here and start downloading a sample app for Android. I can download the SDK. I can download it for these different platforms. And here's my new app, right? So when I look in this app, it's kind of sad. I don't have any users. I don't have any ad impressions. My analytics are looking pretty sad here. But, here's the keys to the kingdom right here, which is, you just get your little API keys and you can kind of stick them in your new app car and you're off and running. So as you can tell from my demo, this service isn't publicly available yet, but we're going to flip the switch tomorrow. So knock on wood, I'm hoping by tomorrow's keynote that I'll be sharing with you the live site. And what I'll encourage you guys to do is go check it out, because we'd love to get some of your feedback, and we'd love to see some apps coming out of this conference that have the cloud connections and start to kind of create this kind of new emergent cloud mobile space that I'm so excited about. So let's see. So I'm going to kind of skip to the end of my slide deck. I had a few slides that were sort of, hey, I'm going to talk more about this platform. But, you know, the worst thing you can do when you talk about developer platforms in front of a developer audience is to show slides about the stuff. You know, I would rather just have you guys go in and, you know, use the stuff. So, you know, I think that's pretty much the gist of it. So, you know, hopefully tomorrow morning I'll be giving you the URL and you can kind of go check it out yourselves. And maybe you guys can build apps while you're sitting in the audience, so whatever. So, you know, just to conclude, you know, why I asked this question. I actually did a keynote for Social Media Week in San Francisco, and I ended with this kind of slide, right? But the question that I asked was, you know, I created this metaphor between infrastructure, which is about old guys, and applications, which are about young guys. And I really want to make sure that when I say, you know, quote unquote guys, you know, I'm talking in a hopefully gender neutral fashion, including, you know, men and women. But what I really mean is that there's old people working on infrastructure, and there's typically younger people working on applications. And the question I asked is, you know, why do older people like myself, why do we build pipes? Why do we build these clouds or these infrastructure pieces, right? And to me, the answer is very simple, which is, you know, we are hoping to spawn innovation, right? We're hoping to create inspiration. And in a way, what we can do as kind of older types is we can only really create the precondition for innovation, right? And so this cloud platform is really just a place where people can experiment and they can create something really crazy that we never would have thought of. And that's really the kind of joy of this. And that's what we're hoping to sponsor. So that's what this is about. By the way, this picture is actually a picture of a flower, but it's zoomed in very close. It's an electron micrograph, so I thought it was kind of attractive. So I'm going to close, probably handing off to Scott next, but I wanted to pitch my talk tomorrow. I know it's a keynote, so you guys are kind of a captive audience, but I do want to encourage you to come because my goal for tomorrow is going to be to talk about this platform. And by what definition is the brain a platform? Well, I'll tell you how it's a platform is the brain is an invariant substrate, right? Like every mobile user has one. And the thing that's interesting is people used to take this concept of a user and they used to think the user was like a dumb terminal. They used to put the user as a green screen and they used to have the user be almost like a database with a bunch of fields, right? This is no way to think about a user because in the age of the App Store, the user has a choice and the user has the ability to download something else and the user has what they feel in their heart and then they have their excitement. And these are dimensions that actually reside in some of these structures. So if you look inside of this slightly yellowish area here, there's this entire limbic system that has a lot to do with what makes people do what they do. And I'm going to apply some of the available research in neuroscience to help us all think about that kind of thing, which is how do you access human behavior, and obviously for the betterment of your own enterprises, right? Because this brain itself is a platform, and that's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, having done research in neuroscience. So with that, would like to close off my keynote and give you all a great thanks and have a great conference.